Uh, Thank you all for coming out. I know there's lots of places you could be, and I really appreciate that you're here today to share this. I wanted to thank also the Office of the Provost under the direction of Dr. Patrick Guilfoyle, and also Rebecca Thacker for putting this all together for me and your to this visit to your lovely campus. I would also like to thank Scott Cabot, your generosity as well. I'm here today. I never, I didn't meet your parents, Arthur and Francis, but they must have been amazing people. They have a remarkable son. So thank you for that, Scott. I have consulted in a lot of universities, around the country. We've had a lot of universities that came into the plant to learn what we had learned, and I've never seen one that's as good as what you have done here. This is amazing. You should be very proud of yourself because what you've done here, not only in your curriculum and what you do there, but also in what you're doing, what I see around when I walk around the campus, it is amazing, and you should be very proud of yourself. And to be number one in the University of Wisconsin system, way to go, Blue Devils. Way to go. That's amazing. You should be very proud. I'm going to attempt to do the remote here and not hit this one button that they say blacks everything out. Now that they told me that, that's probably the one I'll hit. But I always like to start the presentation with this quote from Paul Hawken. He's kind of the godfather of sustainability and as far as the financial and part of sustainability. And he writes, "The future belongs to those who understand that doing more with less is compassionate, prosperous, and enduring, and thus more intelligent, even competitive." And that's kind of what we'll show throughout this presentation is we'll hit on all of these. And it's a beautiful quote, and if you haven't read any of his books, I would highly suggest reading them. Blessed Unrest is a beautifully written book about sustainability, a really amazing gentleman. So where did it all start? So I'm just kind of, the title of this was Success and Adversity. So I wanted to show you what our success was, and we've talked a little bit about it. Scott mentioned some of the adversities of putting this process in, but I wanted to start it out. And so this is the Subaru of Indiana plant in Lafayette, Indiana. Purdue University is usually how I tell people where that's at. They know Purdue University. It's probably a bad word around here, isn't it? No. Is that okay? Oh, are they? Oh, very good, very good. They're good people, yes. Don't boil her up, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, so the steel comes in on the east side of the plant in a coil. It goes through the stamping process into the body shop where it's welded together. From there, it goes out into the paint process, which is the longest process in the plant, back over by conveyors into the trim shop, which is here. I don't think I have which is probably a good thing I don't have a pointer because of my handshakes. But on this side of the plant where it becomes a car, and it's tested, and it goes out the west side of the plant where it becomes property of Subaru of America, and it leaves the foreign trade zone that we have there. And also on property, we have a daycare center, a recreation center, a clinic on site, 5 retention ponds. We're also, I should check my notes here. So we're 4.5 million square feet under roof, 832 acres. When we started the Zero Landfill program, we had 3,700 associates. Right now, they're up to 5,700 associates working in there. There's about 500 to 800 contractors and construction workers that come into the plant every day to work. 2003, we became a National Wildlife Federation backyard wildlife habitat, so that we have all the everything you need for wildlife to sustain there on the property. And so we're very proud of that. We also have 30 acres of native Indiana prairie on the property. Whenever we disrupt ground now, we put it back in with native prairie. Let's see, what am I forgetting? Oh, we're also the safest auto plant in the industry. We have the safest record for our employees. The average in the standard for auto industry is 7.5, which means that for every 100 full-time employees, you have 7.5 recordable injuries or injuries bad enough to record. Our rate when I left there was 0.81, so orders of magnitude less. We've virtually gotten rid of repetitive motion type of injuries. And as it's 85% male, 15% female at the plant, so it's very, very male dominated. When I became manager in 2006, I was the second woman to become manager there. Julie, who's a wonderful woman, still works there in charge of all of the payroll and insurance and associate services, all that. So it was very interesting, should we say. We'll just leave it at that right now. What was started, so these are a few of the awards. We don't do this for the awards, but it was very nice to be recognized. We were for some of the things we were noted for, we were the first auto assembly plant to be 14,001 certified, 9,001 and 50,001. That is environmental, quality, and energy international standards. There's a theme that goes through here. We're very competitive. We like to be the first at things. The first one to be considered a national wildlife backyard habitat. 2003, 2006, and 2014, we received the Indiana Governor's Award for Environmental Excellence. May 4th, 2004, we sent our last load to a landfill. So since that time, I put more in a landfill every day from my home than we have from this 4.5 million square foot facility and 5,700 people. We also, in 2013, were placed in the top 10 of the Sustainia Awards, which was a global award that was given by Grow Brundtland and the UN, that our program could be implemented anywhere and show sustainable results. So it was quite an honor to be recognized by the United Nations for that type of work. And also, as Bob had mentioned, we've met with over 800 companies to share our knowledge with them as well as our competitors. Because at the end of the day, we all breathe the same air, we all drink the same water, we all live in this closed system, save energy, so we need to learn from each other, and we want it to share with them what we've done, but also to share our mistakes. And there were several. We won't go into that's another whole presentation over some beers, let me tell you. But because we didn't want others to make the same mistakes that we had made. Excuse me. So how did it start? Well, it started with dumpster diving, and that's me in a dumpster. The really funny part was getting me in and out of that dumpster, actually. But that's kind of how it started. It started with a request from our parent company, Fuji Heavy Industry at the time. They're now called Subaru Corporation. But they asked us, they didn't ask us, they told us. They said, in 5 years, you will be zero landfill. And I was listening to the interpreter translate that, and I'm sitting there with a smile on my face going, yes, okay. And then it hit, because there's a little delay. And it was like, okay, I have no idea how to start, but we're going to do this. And so all roads lead back to a good inventory. No matter what business you're in, that's where they lead back to. So we wanted to take an inventory of what we were generating. So where were we generating that waste? How was it generated? Why was it generated? What was happening? And from that, then we figured out what kind of containers do we need to put around so we can collect this material properly? Where do we need to put them? Where don't we need to put them? And then we color-coded and standardized everything. I think if you're colorblind, I'm not really sure what you did, but if you were, but most people, no matter where you were in the plant, you knew what to put where. So it was a very good way to start it. What were we dealing with? Everything. You can imagine a facility like that. Everything from cafeteria waste to hazardous waste to plastics, cardboard, paper, just steel, just everything you can possibly think of. We were generating it there at the plant. When we started this process, we were generating 459 pounds of waste for every car that we built. Right now, we're down to 200 pounds per unit, per vehicle, which is huge. Because now you're not paying to have it, first of all, you're not extracting it from the earth, you're not having it produced, you're not bringing it in, you're not warehousing it, which is the highest, warehouse space is the most expensive real estate in any company. You're not paying to have it handled, you're not paying to get rid of it. So by taking that out of the equation, was huge, and that's over 50% reduction in the amount of waste that we were generating. That's really the thing that I actually am the most proud of, to do that. But what we talk about really is our recycling. But that's kind of the very last part of it. But every year we develop targets to decrease that amount of waste generated every year. And every year, I would think, I'm not sure we can reduce it anymore. And, you know, because after a certain point, you think, well, how low can that number actually be? And I don't really know what that number is, because every year we lower it, but every year things change. Now we're making the Subaru Ascent there in the facility in Indiana, so that changed how things are made. That changes the amount of waste. That changes everything. So it's a constantly fluid target the target always comes down. That hasn't changed, and the things that we measure has never changed. We measure the exact same things every year, but it is always amazing that they find ways to reduce that waste that we generate. And what was needed? What was needed for this? We needed the support of our upper management, for sure. And we also needed the support of our associates. So it's very top-driven, top-directed, bottom-driven. So when you bring those two forces together, it is amazing what can be accomplished. You also need a little patience. You need the commitment to do the right thing, even when it's not popular. Because when we started this, the managers, they all said, you know, I'm making a car. I don't care where you put your trash, Denise. I'm making a car, and this isn't part of not in my job description. I'm not going to do this. And we slowly brought them around to show them, you know, this is what you need to do, and this is why you need to do it. And we did that by having those targets, by measuring that, by saying, this is what you're generating in your little property part in this plant. This is how much you're generating. This is what you're contributing. And you need to do something about that. And they weren't very happy with that. But eventually, when they started to see that their associates were very excited about it, that the top management, so they were middle management, basically. So the top management was saying, yes, you will do this, and you will like it. And the associates from underneath are saying, yeah, we do like this, because now we're being heard. We do like this. And we kind of forced them into to what we wanted done. And you also need a sense of humor, because there were days that you just had to laugh. But some of these I took out. Let's see. So the most frequently asked question when people would come in to the plant, they would say, well, how do you motivate your employees? Well, how do you do that? And cattle prods. We actually use cattle prods. And no, I'm joking. We don't use cattle prods. We use tasers. No, we don't. we didn't use tasers. But I think only in Wisconsin would that joke play, because you actually know what a cattle prod is. But what we did is we listened. We listened to our associates. And no one grows up wanting to spend 8 hours a day screwing in the same bolt into a car. They want to do something else, but they're there because of many different reasons. They were just going to be there for a few years, so they got money to go to college, and then the family and the mortgage came, and now they're still there 20 years later. They want to be listened to. And if you listen to people and listen with your heart, and we would go out and we would solicit ideas, and we'd say, you're the ones working with this day in, day out. You're the ones who understand this at a very intimate level, much more than I did. I could tell you, I don't know that much about cars, even though I work for a car company. I don't know about torque and all that kind of stuff. But I do know about the waste, and I do know the people who do know things about cars, and that's what we did. There's an old silent movie, Metropolis is the name of the movie, 1928. And in that movie, there's a part that reads, between the minds that plan and the hands that toil, there is a mediator, and that mediator is the heart. And I think that when you look at, wherever you go in the world, wherever you land, the people you work with, the people that are working for you, listen to them, because they have the ideas and they want to be listened to. They want to belong to something bigger than themselves. And if you allow that, it is truly amazing how quickly and how beautifully an idea can mature. We had 5 years to get to zero landfill. We got there in 2.5 years. And that was, I never thought that we would be able to do it. I never thought we'd be able to do it sometimes, but I never thought we'd be able to do it that quickly. And, but it was by listening to our people and by getting their ideas. They are truly the stars of this program. The Subaru associates are the stars of this program. They make it work. Not only did they make it work in 2004, they continue to make it work today. Excuse me, I'm going to get a sip of water. And then once you have developed that culture, nurture that culture. Continue to breed that trust that you have. And that's why when we talk about having the best safety record in the industry, it was because of those relationships that we built. And it was because people could come to us and say, you know, I'm really hurting when I do it this way. Is there something we can do differently? And then we could go back and we could look at what they were doing. But it was building that trust to begin with. And what are the principles? And these are such simple principles. It really is. It's reduce, reuse, recycle. And it's in that order. It's very simple. Reduce the amount of waste you generate, reuse what you can, and recycle what's left over. And I have just a few examples of that. I don't want to belabor it, but reduction is always this slide is for my own enjoyment. Reduction is the most bang for your buck. I put that in just for me. But I guess I just love it. But it's that's the humor. Yeah, it's relative. But yeah, but people would always ask, so what was that great big project that you had that reduced your waste by 50% and got all your material recycled? And we said there was not one. There were 1,000 little ones. That some of it might be a reduction of 0.001 pound per unit. But there were a couple that I'm going to mention here that were large. And when you look at these and you think, wow, why weren't they doing that all along? And we thought that same thing. But one of them was in the stamping shop. And this is the blanking line. So the coils of steel that we talked about earlier, they come in, they're put here, and then they're threaded through a big blanking machine, like a big cookie cutter that cuts out the approximate size and shape of what we're going to form in the stamping process. And we would get those coils of steel in, and we would thread it through the blanking line, and we'd cut out, say, 100 hoods. And then there'd be whatever left would thread back through, and then that would all go out as scrap. And one of our associates said, well, why don't we just more closely approximate that size of the coil to the run that we're making, and then we won't have as much to throw away. And it was like, duh, yeah. Okay. So why don't we do that? And it was just one of those things that we had just never done. And so it cost nothing to implement that program. And we save 102 pounds of steel for every car that we build. And that's been for the last 7 years we've done that. And today, all the cars that they stamp out today, we still save that much. It's a very sustainable project. Didn't cost anything. Was the right thing to do. Now we're not extracting that steel and generating it and shipping it and all that. So that was a huge savings to the company. Steel is very expensive and now even more than ever. But so that was one of our big projects. The other one, if you can't reduce it, which is the most bang for your buck, going back to that one. You can, oops, see, did I not, it didn't get in there. Oh, well, I'll tell you, I'll just talk about it. So another project that we had for reuse, if you can reduce it, reuse it. And so we would get engine parts in from Japan every day. They would come in the crates, and they were in these 4x4 metal pallets built up. And they had all the engine parts in there with styrofoam, plastic, and cardboard because they were coming on ocean liners. They didn't want to jostle them around on the waters. And we would take those metal crates and we'd bust them back down. They would be put back onto the sea, to the containers, and be sent back to Japan. They'd build them back up. They'd put more of that stuff in there, and they'd ship more parts to us. And that happened for years and years and years. We would do that. And one of our associates said, well, instead of trying to recycle all the styrofoam here, which is a good way to go broke because you're just shipping air when you're shipping styrofoam, why don't we send it back to Japan, leave a few of these crates built up, put the styrofoam back in, send it back to Japan, and they can reuse it. And we thought that's a great idea. So we studied that. And we put a little sticker on each piece of the styrofoam. It's very high tech. We're really high tech. we're a small car company, so you got to do things cheap, you know. So we put this little sticker on the styrofoam, and every time we sent it to Japan, we would put a little tick mark on it. And we thought we'll get 5 trips out of this, and then we'll have to recycle it. And so we got the 5 trips out. The styrofoam was still good, so we went the other way, and we started ticking across. We got 10, we got 15, we got 25. Some of them are 27 trips back and forth to Japan using that styrofoam over and over. Petroleum-based product that we don't have to make from scratch. And we save $1.3 million a year. After all the costs are involved, we had to hire a couple people, buy another forklift, all those costs, and then the shipping of it, which is minimal, still save $1.3 million a year on returning that material to Japan for reuse. Then we have recycling. So these are just 3 commodities that we recycle: steel, wood, and cardboard. So if we would have had to take these tonnage, almost 18,000 tons of steel, 1,300 tons of cardboard, and 864 tons of wood, if we had to take and make that again from virgin material, or how else would be a better way to say it? So the recycling of this packaging and raw material avoided the manufacturing disposal, thereby conserving 27,500 mature trees, 69 million gallons of, or kilowatt hours of electricity, 43,000 cubic yards of landfill space, 631,000 gallons of oil, 33,000 basically gallons of gasoline, enough to drive a Subaru 915,600 miles, so it would just be broke in. Yes. And 9 million gallons of water. So when we were trying to tell our associates, this is what you've done this year, I can't fathom what 17,000 tons of steel look like. I don't know how many Olympic-sized swimming pools that is. I don't know. So this was a good way, because I know what 8,521 homes look like. That was my hometown. So that was enough electricity to run my hometown for a year. So that I can fathom, that I can imagine. And when you let people know that this is what your work has done, this is how you have affected the environment. Their part might have just been putting their plastic cap into the container properly, and as they were taking it off the end of the air conditioner line or whatever it was. But they had a difference. They made a difference, and they take a great deal of pride in what they do for the environment there at SIA. And when you can get a bunch of people whose that's not their job, their job is to build the car. It's not to worry about the environment. When you can get all those people together pulling in the same direction, that's why we have the success that we have. See what else have I got here? Oh, there it was. Anyway. So we started from the very beginning with environmental accounting, and because we wanted to justify our existence. Because when you're in the compliance section of any manufacturing facility, as I have for the last 30-some years, you're a drain to the bottom line, because you're not really doing anything for the product. You know, you're just taking money from the bottom line, basically. And it always kind of upset me, because I figured that I was giving something to the company, but it just couldn't really be monetized. So I decided we would start doing the environmental accounting very early on. And so we have all the costs. So you can imagine all the bean counters have every cost of that program. And then we said, what were the benefits of it? What were we actually money coming back into our coffer? So not how much we were saving on the reduction process projects, but actual money coming back in. Over the last 10 years, we've had $1.5 million benefit over the cost of our program every year. So huge savings. Because, and you know, I think back in the 70s when it started, it was the Environmental Protection Act was started. It was framed very well in that it costs too much to be environmentally friendly. If you are being environmentally friendly in your corporation, you're costing this company money, and we can't have that. And that's what I faced when I started, because I would go and I would learn about the environmental regulations, and they would tell you the loopholes to be able to get out of doing the things that you need to do right. I never used the loopholes. And that was a great part about the environmental. No one really understood it, so I could go back to the plant, and my operations manager would go, okay, well, if you say so, we have to do it that way. So, yeah. sorry. And so they never really knew. But we never, it was one of those things where we weren't costing the company money either. And as you can see, not thinking about your effect on the environment is very expensive. Because when you can save this kind of money in just recycling and doing the right thing, it's a very powerful thing to show people. And there was, in those companies that came in, all the people that came in from that, they didn't come in, most of them came in because they didn't believe it, but that was okay. But a lot of them came in wanting to see how we did it, and some of them came in thinking this will never work. And when I got to the point about how much it saved us, a lot of them perked up at that point, saying, "Oh, ooh, wow, okay, you are saving money. Maybe I will look at this." And so it's a very powerful thing to have in our back pocket to say, "Yeah, we do earn money with this." And this is just a little bit of how we nurtured that culture. This is Kaizen, which is a Japanese term for continuous improvement. These are all around the plant. These are Kaizen points. These are places where associates have come up with ideas. We put those ideas out so that they can see what they've done. So they see their work on display. Associate teamwork, working together. The body shop. It used to be that statistically we would take so many cars off the line every day, and we would take them back to the destruct room, which is exactly what it was. We would destruct the car. We would take air hammers and chisels and break the welds apart, and then look at the inside of the weld to make sure it was a good weld before we let those cars go out to our customer. And the people in the body shop, which is what you see up here where they're welding, they said, why don't we use some ultrasonic technology? We can get a quantitative amount of that weld. We can then take that car, put it back onto the line. It can be finished off, and we're not throwing away those several thousand pounds of steel every day. So it was a wonderful idea. We had to work with different teams to make that happen. So there is there? Am I doing this with my? Do you see it here buzzing? Maybe it's me. It's just. Oh, the kitchen. At home, it's my smoke detector that goes off when it's ready, but this is good too. So motivate management through measurement. So, and we talked about that a little earlier, measuring what we're doing, keeping track financially what we're doing. But so every manager is held accountable for his section, for how much waste he generates in that section, and it has forced him to listen to his associates to figure out ways to reduce it, because he will come in every month to a meeting and he will have to explain to the president and vice presidents and all the officers there why he is not making his target. And it's not a fun meeting when that happens. When you have to be the one saying you're not doing what everyone else seems to be able to do, it becomes very very hurtful. And so then that's also very motivating for the managers to want to do that. And you don't want to be the woman who's given them a target that's not achievable either. So you want to that was part of how do you make that target so it's achievable yet not so easy that they don't have to try. So there was a fine line in getting that done. But we used all this measurements to be able to do that. Section environmental targets boards in every section so that the associates can go by there every day, see what is my mission, what are our targets, where are we in those targets month to date, and what are the ideas that we've come up with to make sure that we reach those targets. So everyone's informed. It doesn't matter if you're the janitor or the CEO, you know what's going on at a glance. This was our top management safety meeting. This was all the executives would come out once a week, and we'd go to a different section every week, and they would, the associates then were allowed to present their ideas to the president. And that's basic. We never paid out money for these. We never gave a lot of big gifts for these. It was just the pride of being able to say this was my idea, it was implemented, and I got to tell it to the president, which was a big deal. That's our Tom Easter, that's our executive vice president right there. I don't think you can see our president's kind of behind one of those guys there, but that's what we would do every week. And I think that really is what separated us from the herd, because it really did show, all the associates, that our executives were behind this. That's kind of the plant. So we took what we learned at the plant, and in 2016, when the National Park Service celebrated their 100th anniversary, we were a premier partner, which meant that we wrote a really big check to the Park Service, or the Park Foundation actually, so that they could celebrate their 100th year. And we wanted to do more than just be that company that wrote the check. We wanted to give them something that could sustain them for another 100 years. So we had this knowledge that we had given to a lot of different companies. How can it work in the National Park Service? And so that's what we have embarked on now, and that's what I do now out of New Jersey. So that's what, to give you a little bit of update of what we're doing here with the National Park Service. But I think I hit it another time. This is a short video.
We have fallen heirs to the most glorious heritage a people ever received. And each of us must do his part if we wish to show that the nation is worthy of its good fortune. Theodore Roosevelt. When President Roosevelt set aside millions of acres of land to be preserved forever, he did so knowing these were places of immeasurable value to humanity. Places of unequaled beauty that people all over the world would flock to. But this popularity comes at a cost few of us ever think about. Trash. Each year, visitors to our national parks create over 100 million pounds of garbage that ends up in our nation's landfills. Fortunately, we can do something about it. This year, Subaru, together with the National Park Service and the National Parks Conservation Association, will work toward the goal of making these incredible places zero landfill. Starting with Yosemite, Grand Teton, and Denali, we'll leverage Subaru's zero landfill expertise to help make garbage there a thing of the past. It won't be easy, but like President Roosevelt, we understand this is something we must do for those generations yet to come.
Back on. So that video was put together for us by Carmichael Lynch, just right about an hour from here in Minneapolis, our advertising agency of record. But it does kind of speak nicely to what the problem is in the national parks. We're loving them to death. And so, as I said earlier, I think I jumped ahead of myself here, but we took the principles that we learned at the plant, and we're implementing them in the national parks, and we're also giving them grant funding to help with the infrastructure, with hiring people, with labeling, with marketing, all that needs to happen for that. And we also did a really nice study using Leave No Trace Ethics Organization, and Penn State did a nice study on behavior, people's behavior when they go to the parks. And 95% of the people who go to parks want to recycle properly. They just didn't have what was needed to be able to do it properly. So that's why the containers and the labeling and all that went in to the parks. That was one of the first things we did. I will say that the project is working, thankfully for Mike, because I'm not old enough to retire yet, but it is working. So when we look at the number of people visiting those parks and the amount of waste per visitor, that number is going down, and the recycling number is going up. So we're getting the benefit that we want from it. Not as quickly as we wanted it, but we are getting that benefit. The problem, the national parks, over 100 million pounds of trash, and that does not even include the concessionaire waste. So the concessionaires own all the hotels, all the restaurants, all the souvenir shops. If we were to include that money, it's probably 3 times, or that amount of waste is 3 times the amount of waste than what the National Park Service collects. So we started with 3 pilot parks, Denali, Grand Teton, and Yosemite, and we have combined the concessionaires waste, and with that, about 16.6 million pounds of waste in 2014 in those 3 parks. That's enough waste to fill the Washington Monument 62 times. So it's a huge amount of, and it's one of those things when you go to the parks, you never see it because they're very good at getting it out of the way. But they have to in many, because of the animals. You don't want the bears and all the other animals to be getting into that, so they have to move it quickly away. And you never see it, so it's not a problem when you don't see it, But so these are the 3 pilot parks. Very hard to get a picture of Denali when it's not snowing. But that's it's a famous bear, 399. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of 399. It's its number, its collar number. But she's you see her a lot if you go to Grand Teton, and that was her cub that year. Some of the common tasks that we did, the baseline waste characterization, just like we did at the plant. We got that waste characterization, that inventory of what was being generated, where, why, how. We improved the infrastructure. We formed community committees. So we went out to the communities because in these areas, the park is the engine of making money for those areas. So we had to involve everyone in that. Also worked with Recycle Across America, which is, again, over in Minneapolis, an organization who is working to standardize all the recycling labels that you see so that no matter where you are, you can see the same thing and you know what to put. Oh, my plastic bottle goes there. Also working with local and national stakeholders that take things into the parks, U.S. Foods, Cisco, those types of companies. Can we use recycling, reusable containers instead of cardboard? Working at those type of things, trying to get that waste stopped from even going into the parks to begin with. And then, of course, employee engagement programs in the parks. The park's very hierarchical, so it's very much top-down driven. So if we can get the ideas from the bottom up, we'll see a big difference in how they run those programs. So how can you help? So this is my plea to everyone who goes to state or national parks. So if every one of the 331 million visitors that went to the national parks last year, had they just taken their bottle, their reusable bottle, a coffee mug, and a reusable bag, we could have reduced the amount of waste per visitor from 20 ounces down to about 5 ounces per visitor, saving about 310 million pounds of waste. That's enough to fill the Washington Monument 1,122 times. So just those 3 simple things. And your visit hasn't been impacted in any way at all because you're still getting that same visitor experience, but you're not generating all the waste that then that park has to get rid of in some ways. And their budgets keep shrinking, and it's not going to get any better anytime soon, unfortunately. I think this next one, that's actually Molokai. That's not, actually on the other side of the island actually on this side of the island is the leper colony on Molokai, which is a national park. But I never give up on your dreams, especially when people say it's impossible to do it. And I've had no less than 9 people on this park project tell me we can't do this. This is not possible in the national parks. And we can do this. And whether you say you can or you can't, you're right. And if we say we can make this happen. And I think that's probably the thing that I would impart to the students, especially. Never give up, because it's amazing when you share your dreams how big they can become and how much better they can become. But that's, I think, all I had. There was my contact information if you need to contact me, but that's all I had. I think we take questions now, I think, if we have questions, if anyone have any questions. Or don't be shy. I know, and usually I go way over because I'll talk trash all day. I knew I had to get that line in. Yes, sir. I think do we have a mic for him? Okay. Oh, Denise has, oh, there she is. The other Denise.
Are we on?
Yeah, oh, good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think all of your efforts are commendable and amazing at Subaru. I think that we all can greatly appreciate the amount of work that this is. Chuck Bomar, Dean of the STEM College, Science, Technology, Engineering, Mathematics, Management.
Oh, great.
And I'm very pleased to see all of this. It's very exciting to me. So we see that Subaru spent a lot of time working on stuff going in the plant. Mm-hmm. What thought, knowing that a Subaru is likely to last for not quite ever, but nearly ever, what thoughts have gone into things like design for deconstruction once the car is done?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. At the end of the life of that vehicle, what happens to all that material in there? And that's Japan is working. Fuji Heavy or Subaru Corporation is working on that and have been for many years as to what can we do with all that material. And at the plant, the majority of what we put in that car can be recycled. One of the exception is the headliner, because you have the carpet on the one side and it's like a fiberglass on the other side. So how do we look at those types of things? How can we design for sustainability so that when we're making these cars at the end of the life of the vehicle, what can we take and put back into the car? And that's kind of what we're looking at right now. It's a very slow process, unfortunately. But looking at that circular economy as to what happens, younger people don't want to buy cars. They're not wanting to buy cars much to our chagrin because we want to sell them. But what do we do in 20 years from now so to make this a more circular type of industry? So do we just take parts of the car off and replace parts, and we keep the biggest part of the heaviest part of the car there and just change out part? I mean, so there's all kinds of thoughts that are going on now as to what would that look like. But now, today, in Japan, if you buy a Subaru, you pay a cost, and then at the end of the life of that vehicle, then they get rid of it, they recycle it. So I think that would be nice to have here so that we can get some of those costs of that recycling covered, that we've kind of externalized all those costs. But as far as the parts in those cars, the plastic they're a good olefin plastic, so they're really that type of plastic recyclers really love. The metals and steels the fluids can be recycled. If you take those out, can be reused at least or cleaned and reused. So there's really a lot that we're doing that can. We've gotten rid of a lot of the European Union, the hexavalent chromium, the cadmium, lead, mercury, reduce those down to the point where they're almost non-existent, so that when we do get rid of that car, we don't have those persistently bioaccumulative chemicals to have to worry about. So yeah, looking at all those. Does that answer it? Or? Okay. Anything else?
I was wondering, of those 800 companies you've trained, have any of them made it to zero landfill?
They actually have. There have been a few. So we don't usually like to shout out who they were, but I will. It's Coors is one of them that we met with, Freightliner, GE Locomotives, Burt's Bees. I'm trying to now I'm drawing a blank, but there has been quite a few. And the ones who didn't quite make it to zero, they are working towards their environmental management system and putting in things that are helping it. So some companies it's a little more difficult. We met with the duck farm in Indiana. Indiana is the biggest producer of duck in the United States. Who knew? And so they have to be known for something. It's ducks. But so that process, they're doing. So the feathers are reused. The meal that's produced is put into dog meal. They put in another whole process onto their plant to take that to make it into dog food. So I mean, those types of things are a little harder to get rid of, but they're working to do it. So yeah. So some obscure companies too. Any other? Yes, ma'am. You had one here. I'll just give you this one. Here we go.
So I'm wondering what sort of impacts maybe Subaru has had since 2004 related to recycling outside of Subaru, right? So some of the things that we discussed in my industry is we would like to recycle in my industry, but find issues of trying to like locations to recycle. Where do they take the products? So what changes have you seen in advancements of taking those products since 2004? And what are you seeing that there's still challenges for recycling?
That's a great question. There has been a lot of changes, and especially just recently when China has kind of stopped the plastics recycling from going over there. That's hurt a lot. But in some respect, I think it'll be better for us in the long run because it'll force us then to make that infrastructure here in this country. We're very lucky in the Midwest in that a lot of the recyclers are right here through this band from Michigan, Wisconsin, Indiana, down a little farther. So we do have that advantage. Not like being in the West Coast where everything has to be shipped to the East than to be recycled. But it is more difficult now with China not taking the plastics. I think looking at what we're generating and changing it, so that it can be something that can be recycled. Simple things that we did at the very beginning were we couldn't recycle blue shrink wrap, but we could recycle clear shrink wrap. So now we went to our suppliers and we said, we just want clear shrink wrap. We don't want the black ties around the pallets. We want the green tie around the pallet because we can recycle that. So getting back to the supplier to say, look, you're part of this process, so we need you to help us with our goals, and we did that to all of our suppliers. We went back to all of them and said 86% of our suppliers are ISO 14001 certified. Some of them aren't because it's a very expensive process, and some of them weren't, but they have environmental management systems that they've put into place to help with that. But doing that and saying, don't send us all this cardboard and don't send us all this redundant packaging. Get rid of some of that. So looking at that can really help. And again, it's reducing that. But yeah, you're right. The plastic in the recycling industry, I think when we started out as when we started out source separated, it was the way to go. And then we got lazy and we put everything together, and that we introduced labor into the process. And when we introduced that labor into the process, it really slowed things down. And I think the idea was for companies to automate all that so that we would use air and water and all kinds of things to blow the stuff and separate it out as it went down the line. But that's very expensive. And the prices, I never understood it when they started because you're not getting much for this. I mean, the styrofoam, we were lucky to break even with the styrofoam because the transportation cost would be just what you were getting back. And if we could break even, that was a good thing. If you can make a little bit, that's an excellent thing. So, reducing it, of course, is always the best way. But then, getting with these waste companies and these companies that are doing this to say, look, this is what we want to do. And companies, some of the water bottles and things like that, they want those plastic bottles back. They just can't seem to get them back. Yeah. Any other? Yes, sir.
I'll just yell.
Okay.
So
You're used to manufacturing. You can yell.
maybe not so much for Subaru, but in your consulting, how do companies usually go about selecting a location? Because I feel like maybe there's some locations that are better, easier, more publicity. Like how do they select those locations? And then sort of tangential to that, how did Subaru select those 3 parks? Because Yosemite's very busy. The other 2 a little less so. So I'm just
Yeah.
curious about that.
I'm not sure how they selected those parks. That was done before I got into it. But they're all iconic parks. They're all Western parks. And yeah, you're right. Yosemite has about 5 million visitors a year. Denali about 600,000, and all within about 120 days. And then Grand Teton is pretty much all year long because they have the ski industry out there too. But not in the park proper, but in that area. But the first one, how do we select where we send our recycling, or how we?
No, when you're consulting with other companies on
Oh.
zero waste, how do they go about selecting a facility that they want to target for zero
Oh,
waste?
I think that they had,
Company-wide?
it was a lot of it. It was about, so say they have 15 facilities across the United States. Which one did they want to target first to trial it in? A lot of it was based on the management of a certain facility. There was a manager who wanted to take it on, who wanted to take it up. Lots of it was, it was a directive from the corporation to do this, but they didn't know how to get it started. And they thought this is a good facility because it's in a good place. They have, good teamwork there. And that's basically how they would decide that was the company or that was the one part to start with. Yeah. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Yeah, there is. I do think that people think that, it's my one plastic bottle. It's not going to make a difference in the big scheme of things. But then, by communicating that back to say to the people who, and like that you're doing here at the university, explaining this is what we've done, and this is how it's changed things. We do the same thing at the plant. Here's the amount of plastic we've recycled this year, and this is what it's changed. That, you know, it's enough plastic to you know, or enough recycling to help power, you know, 8,500 homes for a year. So being able to tell people that it does make a difference, and even the visitors to the national park, they're not thinking when they're coming to the national park, oh, I need to take my water bottle because I can help save. But if all 311 million, so we don't have to do, you know, we don't have to live in grass huts and eat, you know, nuts and bark to make a difference for the environment. Wild hickory nuts. That's an old commercial. But you can make a big difference in little things, you know, when it's such a huge mass of people doing it. And you get that economy of scale, you know, like at Walmart or McDonald's do one little thing, it changes things drastically because they're huge. You know, so if we can, you know, just those little things can make a big difference, and everyone pulling together, I think. Mm-hmm. Yes. Hi. You want this? We're close. We'll do that. Okay.
Hi, thank you. So Glendale Rodriguez, I'm the Associate Provost, and it's great to meet you. Thank you. So I guess I want to take this a little bit different to just a slant about your leadership style, and if you can talk to the point of and any advice you have, right? And also as a woman in a male-dominated industry. So can you talk on those topics a little bit for anyone who might be wondering how, you know, what do you attribute your success to?
I attribute it to a lot of gin. No. Yeah. No. You know, I think. That's why I ordered gin last night. No, I think it is about showing people what's in it for them. You know, showing them that they can be part of something bigger, that they can help. You know, that we are building a car in this facility, and that is what we're all here for. That's why we're in Subaru of America. That's why we're in New Jersey. We're here to sell cars. That is our core business. But what can we do along with that, you know? And I think that's kind of, I don't know if I have a style, except that I'm very easygoing to a point. but I think really listening to people, I think is kind of the heart of it all. Listening to the managers, because they would come to me and they would say, in very colorful language, that, you know, this isn't my waste. I saw his people putting waste over here, and this is his waste, and now you're charging me for this, and this isn't mine, and by God, I'm not going to be paying it. You know, and you'd go through all that, but you'd listen to what his concerns were, and then you would try to figure out a way to mitigate those concerns and to make him feel better about what it was that he was complaining about, or had legitimate complaints, and maybe I just didn't understand the whole picture. I didn't understand that was happening, and I needed to change it. So I really listening to people. I don't think you can stress that enough. And I think that, and the other thing is being able to say I don't know was huge for me, because I think we get to a certain point in an organization, and you're paid to know all the answers. We think. You know, we think that, well, you know, I should know the answer because I'm getting paid this. I should know what the answer is, but you can't know all the answers. And so to be able to say, I don't know, can you help me? That, for me, was this huge relief to be able to say that and not be afraid to say it. And to know that there was other people who wanted to help. And I think that's sharing that dream. You know, when you can share that dream and that idea, whatever that idea is, share it with other people and see how big it becomes. I think it's amazing. Someone said it's amazing what can be accomplished when you're not worried about who gets the credit. And when you can do that and be open and honest and heartfelt, then I think that's really how things can be changed quickly. Not as quickly as I'd like sometimes, but at least changed. Yes.
Hello, Denise.
Yes. Oh, Reagan.
You mentioned economy of scale, and something that was bouncing around my head as you were talking is Subaru isn't the biggest car maker on the block, but have you seen, I think you touched on a little bit, your competitors, have you pushed them morally or competitively from $1 cents to move them? Because some of the big animals on the block, a GM or a Toyota, that's where the economy of scale, and especially in recycling, is developing those markets.
Right. We did. We met with our competitors for this. We meet every year on the safety side of the world to challenge them to become better on the safety side. But from the environmental side, we did meet with all of our competitors. We did not meet with Ford and GM, but we did meet with Chrysler. Just because it's kind of a Japanese thing, they didn't want to. But we did Honda, Toyota, Mercedes, all of those that we call the transplant companies that end up here in this country from another country.